Hi everybody! Today I'm going to be talking about a tip that is not actually more new age so much as old school. Today we are going to figure out how to use German to English dictionaries like old style paper ones, and even the digital ones will do the same thing, but we're going to learn to use them properly today and how to get the most out of your dictionary. So let's take a look at the Langenscheid's dictionary that I borrowed from our high school's library. Within its first few pages, you'll notice that there's a page that has a list of dates. One of these dates is the most recent reprint of that book. In this case, it was reprinted in 1986, which means that this dictionary is 10 years older than the spelling reform of 1996. For example, whenever I look up the modal auxiliary müssen, it ends up showing the ich form as ich muss, spelled with an SZ, instead of ich muss, spelled with two S's. The second thing that I would suggest that you look at is the table of contents. In most textbooks and other reference works, the table of contents is more or less completely useless, but in a dictionary it may actually come in handy. Here you will not only find where the dictionary actually starts from the German to English perspective, but you will also find resources that are printed in the dictionary like the Symbols Guide or Grammar Review. Keep in mind that there are actually two separate tables of contents, one for each version of the dictionary. Both of them have similar but not identical information. In the Langenscheid's dictionary from my high school, it includes a preface, which is completely pointless unless you really want to know about the history of how this dictionary became a thing, the guide to the dictionary, which I will be talking about here in a bit, abbreviations, a key to pronunciation, grammar information, and irregular verbs. All of this is actually before you get to the dictionary itself. There's even more information after the dictionary ends with the Z's. It includes a list of proper names in German with their English versions. There's also a list of conversion information at the end of each version of the dictionary. In the guide to the dictionary, you'll find all kinds of helpful information in both German and English. In this dictionary, the English is on the left and the German is on the right. It talks about how the words are alphabetized and arranged, how definitions of phrases using certain words are set up, what a few symbols mean, what happens if a word is using more than one meaning, how and why parentheses are used, how they reference one word from another word to show that the words are related in some way, why are there hyphens in certain words, and noun genders. Most of this information isn't all that important, but what is important is to figure out how your dictionary handles syllable breaks or glottal stops. In the example from this dictionary, you'll see the difference between Bläschen and Bläschen, which is not really a thing. The first one, the syllable break, is before the CHEN, and in the other example, the SCHEN is all stuck together. So instead of saying Bläschen, which is the correct pronunciation, so you would try and avoid saying something like Bläschen. Obviously, the second one there is not a real word. The abbreviations in the dictionary will come in handy when you come across a word with multiple definitions and you don't know which one you need for the context you want. For example, if you look up the word Schild in German, you'll find that it could translate as shield, coat of arms, or a carapace, which apparently is the shell of a turtle, crustacean, or arachnid, which I had to look up because I didn't know the English word for that. The difference is when you look at the abbreviations that precede the entry, these will tell you what kind of category they fall into. If it's the military abbreviation, it's probably a shield or coat of arms. But if it's using the zoology definition, it's probably a carapace. The pronunciation key is incredibly helpful because paper dictionaries lack the audiophile feature that you'll find on your internet dictionaries. I don't know what any of these symbols mean because I've never studied these things. I would have to look up this thing that looks like a long S, and that makes apparently the SCH sound in the word Schild. The list of suffixes is helpful when you get to the point in your German learning when you start to recognize that a lot of words have similar endings, and those endings dictate the gender of the German noun, and certain ones are always the same gender. It's also helpful for translating certain words when you don't know the entire word, but you know part of it. If you know the first part of the word means one thing, and the ending changes it in a specific way, you can figure out what the rest of the word means together. There's also a list of grammatical references which are handy for figuring out what the abbreviations in front of the word mean. It explains the difference between a transitive and intransitive verb, as well as the German case system, although very briefly, so that you can know when something requires a certain case, such as the dative verbs or dative prepositions. You'll also find an alphabetical list of irregular verbs. This will show you the infinitive, preterite form, and past participle in German. You'll still have to look up what the word means, but it might give you a start to figuring out what verbs are irregular. Also, this list is only for the base forms of verbs and excludes any verbs with a separable or inseparable prefix, such as bekommen, which is listed under the verb kommen. Let's take a look at some example words to see what this looks like in context with what you learned from the first part of the dictionary. You'll notice that there's a little tick mark above the words that start with ab. That's because the prefix ab always takes the emphasis in a multisyllabic word. Words like abgraben, or abgreifen, or abhaben. All of those have the emphasis first. If you get to a word where the emphasis is on a different syllable, you'll find this little tick mark before the part that needs the emphasis. For instance, the verb befragen, the fragen part gets the emphasis. Let's take a look at the word Löwe. The entry shows that this is a masculine noun, with the little im there, and it also shows you that the plural form is in, which is what this in parentheses there. In zoological terms, this means lion, but in astrological terms, it means Leo, like the sign of the zodiac. There is an arrow at the end of this, which means you might look for the phrase that is under the word Höhle. If you go to Höhle, then you will notice that this means cave. But at the end of the listing, it shows Die Höhle des Löwen, which translates as the lion's den. If you look up a word like hoch, you'll find that it has a ton of definitions that follow, but you'll also see that it's an adjective and it means high. It becomes höher and höchst when it's in the comparative and superlative forms. If you look up an adjective that is regular in the comparative and superlative, like breit, you'll only find the definition, because the dictionary assumes you know how things are supposed to work normally. It only shows you the exceptions to the rule. Under the listing for hoch, you'll also find a bunch of uses for that word in phrases that you might need. If you look up the same type of words on the other side of the dictionary, you'll find similar entries. The word abacus, for instance, shows the pronunciation guide off to the side. There it shows you that the emphasis should be on the first syllable. If you look at the pronunciation guide of a word like abysmal, you'll notice that the pronunciation says you should have the emphasis on the biz part. If you look up the English word lion, which is the same thing we did in the German for Löwe, you'll notice that you have something similar to what the German version did. It shows that it's a noun and translates to the word Löwe in German. Since the English plural is mostly s or es, the dictionary will only show you an irregular plural, like the word cactus changing to cacti. Also in the listing for the lion, you'll find words like to go to the, and you'll find that that phrase is the same one that we saw in the German version, but a little bit more in depth. Now we have sich in die Höhle des Löwen wagen. If you look up the word high, same word that we looked up earlier, hoch, you'll notice that it's almost the exact same thing that you saw in the German version. Here you have the comparative and superlative form of the adjective, as well as some uses for the adjective. There's a list at the end of the dictionary that shows irregular verbs in English, which I would like to point out at this time is longer than the German version of the same list at the beginning of this dictionary. There are 3 columns per page on this list for the English version, and only 2 columns per page on the German side. English verbs are hard to understand. German is actually for once easier in this aspect. While most of the dictionaries that you're going to find are a little bit different here and there in the way that they do things, you'll find that almost all dictionaries are formatted pretty similar to this one. So go out there and pick up an English to German dictionary or a German to English dictionary and check out those extra things that you find in there, because it's not just for looking up words, but also finding out all kinds of other information while you're there. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss.